All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kick things over to Jake to give you a breakdown of the world famous Stanford roommate essay.
World famous. Yeah. And that's such a great point you made about linking academics to something fun. Two of the most successful essays I've seen have been a student who wanted to be a chemistry major, and she wrote about learning how to bake a cake for her dad, this really complex cake, and how she did that. And then another student who wrote about losing all of his life savings, all of his Christmas and holiday money he'd always made in the stock market as an aspiring business major. They both came upon these challenges, but showing that they really were having just fun getting into the learning of these things. But here we are with virtually all students, undergraduates, all Stanford's undergraduates live on campus. So that's going to be one of you, hopefully, here soon. So what do you want to tell that future roommate? And this is one of my favorite essays to brainstorm, like I already said, because I always end up learning something like fun and vital about my students that honestly, they just were like, oh, I never thought that was important to tell you, because it seemed too silly or it seemed not important enough or not. Sometimes it becomes even bigger essays when we hone in on these things. But I like to say, if you're anything like me, you've made some pretty awkward first impressions in your life. And we all go home that night and we think, God, if I could just write that down and do that over. And this is your chance, okay? This is your chance to finally get it just perfect, to get your tone perfect, to think about exactly what you're going to say. What would you say to this person? And in fact, I really want you to think about all your essays that way. All of your essays. This is your chance to make that perfect first impression.
That's actually a great and underrated piece of advice. I see a lot of comments and live streams and questions that are like, I'm stuck. I have writer's block. Like, how do I get past that? And I honestly, like, sometimes just thinking about, okay, let's say my friend asked me this question, right? Now, depending on who your friends are, that may or may not be a normal question they'd ask you, but let's say your friend asked you that question and you were just giving an authentic just answer to your friend. How would you answer that? I think that can sometimes be a way to get you unblocked. Yeah, all right. Now, there are a couple of additional points that I think are worth thinking through in this essay in terms of what you want to stay away from. So right. Jake, definitely feel free to talk them through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When you think about the fun that colleges want you to be having during your 4 years there, that's generally not anything that is going to make the papers and reflect poorly on them. We try to avoid that if that is your type of fun. But I like the PowerPoint says there are ways to talk about things in a serious manner, and kind of like we talked about earlier with sensitive topics. If your roommate knowing about your gender identity or your sexuality or your background, your culture, your home life, like if that is the most important thing you want that person to know about you, then definitely talk about that. But we don't want to like kind of veer into, again, things that are going to look poorly on you, things you wouldn't tell your grandma maybe or someone you just met, because it's a good place to show admissions like what type of student you're going to be, right? Like how involved are you going to be on campus, and they're choosing students that are going to come onto campus, who are going to get involved in everything campus has to offer, who's going to really add something to the community and maybe even leave something behind. And sometimes I have students start from there. Like, what do you want to be remembered by whenever you leave?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a really easy way to understand it is like your sexuality is absolutely something you can write about. Whether you want to do it in particular for this essay or not is a separate question, but your sex life or your romantic life usually is not. And I think it's not necessarily even fair, because that might be an important part of who you are as a person or whatever. But it is just, there's like an appropriateness context that you have to keep in mind, right? Like you are writing a application to a professional institution, to an institution where you're effectively implicitly, even though I guess you would, if you pay out of pocket, you're paying $70,000 a year, you're like an employee, you're a representative of the university to some extent, and they take that into account.